One love to the humble, one love to the humble, one love to the humble. May grace and peace be multiplied unto you. And if you're having trouble in your life, excuse me, things are not going well in your life, I hope they start to turn around right here today. Hope things get better for you. Hope you can progress and just continue to move forward and continue to enjoy your life and enjoy your days. Don't let things hold you down. You continue to maintain and always look to the future. Everything gonna be all right. Now look, we got another great video request by the good brother Trey Day. Now, if you have a video request that you like, go ahead and comment it in the comment box below. So here go the video request. The video request today is the difference between the women of the 80s and 90s compared to the women of today. And like, what's the difference? Or is there any difference? For those of you who may not know, some of you may think it's always been this way, that women have always been this way, and there was never anything different. Well, there was a time when women were very, very different than they are today. And you have to study history. You have to study the feminist movement and the different ways of feminism and how it has changed over the years and become what it is today. When feminism first began, I made a video on this before, but when feminism first began, it wasn't anything like it is today. And to be honest with you, when you do your research, and I suggest you go do your research, anything that I say here on this channel, I suggest you go look it up for yourself to verify so you'll know it for yourself, not because I said so. There is nothing on this channel that is not rooted in some type of research that I've done. I may put my own perspective on it, but the root of it is based in truth. I've done my research on it. I'm not just going to talk without having knowing anything about what I'm talking about. Whether it be lived experience or just experience just things I've looked up. And what I typically do is combine them two together. I combine my real life experience with my research. Now, back to what I was saying. Women of the 80s and 90s were very different than women of today. The feminist movement has made women what you see right now is direct result of feminism. So there was a time when women, you hear the argument about women not having bank accounts. Women couldn't own this and women couldn't own that and blah, 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 blah. But the part they don't tell you about is why that was. And the other part they don't tell you about is women may not have had their own bank accounts and all that stuff, but they still were able to spend money. Don't get that confused. And the man had to take on the woman's debt. So whatever she went out and spent, bought, whatever, he had to take the debt on regardless of what. It was a law that the man took on the debt. He didn't have a choice in the matter. So they make it, they word it in a, when you don't know what you listening to and you don't know what they're saying, you'll get confused by the language. And some of them don't even know what they're talking about either. They just spewing something that they heard somebody else say. They have not done any research. But you can tell the women who have done research because when they speak a little bit different about it. Okay, so don't get caught up in the weeds of that. Just understand that a lot of these feminists don't even know what they're talking about. And they the ones who are pushing for what they're pushing for or talking about the things they're talking about of the past, and they have no clue of what was going on in the past with these women. And another thing, most of the women during the suffrage movement, most of those women back then did not want to be a part of the feminist organization. They didn't want it. They didn't want to be a part of it. But you don't need everybody to make a change. You get about 15% or maybe less, and you can make a change. You don't need the whole race or the whole gender group or whoever to be a part of it. You just need enough to make noise. Pretty much what they did. But most women back then did not want a part of it. Also, I'm just giving you some facts before I get into it. Also, women did not want to vote. They did not want to be a voter because they knew back then that voting was going to make them a political pawn. And they had more power outside of voting than they did inside of voting. Plus, voting came with military prescription. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. I just put in my words. Voting came with, they had to sign up for the military at 18, like men do. Like men, all y'all men who watching this, you already know that when you turn 18, you got to sign up for the selective service so that if a draft is ever implemented, you got to go to war. But back then, the women didn't want to be a part of that, so they didn't. That's why they wasn't voting. They didn't want to vote because they didn't want to be a part of that type of system. But those overall, but the feminists, they wanted to do all these things, and they kind of made it. They messed it up for the other women, and most of the women back then also did not want to work. I'm not making this up. You can go research it. They did not want to work. They was okay with being stay-at-home moms. They didn't want to be in the workforce. But the feminists came along and they pushed for women to go to work. But what do you think is going to happen if you double the workforce? If you double the workforce, the wage is going to drop. That's what's going to happen. So moving forward, I'm going to get off of that and I'm going to get on to what I'm making the video about. It's a lot of facts that I can give you about this feminist stuff that the feminists don't even know. But anyway, the difference between the women of the 80s and 90s and the women today. Well, if you look around, I'm gonna just speak in the black community. This is in general all women, but in particular the black community is what I'm speaking on. Women have been convinced of this thing of this patriarchy idea, like men have some type of power. But what they fail to realize is there are a select few men that's in power, and those men got power over the rest of us men. So it's not like we are in some type of different scenario than the woman is. We all of us, men and women, are under the same patriarchy. We don't get no special treatment because we're men. We don't get any of that. We get treated the same way anybody else would if we are caught doing something wrong. So that's the first thing. But what's different about the women of the 80s and 90s and the women of today? Well, back in the 80s and 90s, women were more respectful. Women were more joyful. They were more like polite. They were more nicer. They were more all of those things. Now, I did not say that all women were that way. I said the majority of women were nice, polite, kind, very feminine. They acted feminine. They wasn't rough and tough. They wasn't trying to be masculine. They was cool with being women. They danced like women. They did women things. They didn't. You knew the difference between a man and a woman because certain things women just would not do that men would do. It wasn't in her nature to act that way. It still ain't in a woman's nature to act that way, but they do it. They go against their nature. But I'm gonna get into that in a few minutes. But right now, I'll stick right here. Back then, they were that way. They treated themselves like women. They acted like women. They were feminine. They dressed accordingly. They didn't have all the things they had going on now because all those things were shameful. And those women had pride in themselves and they did not want to be shamed. Now, don't get me wrong. There were still women that were doing things that were shameful, but they wasn't boasting about it. They wasn't bragging about it. They didn't put it out for everybody to know. You had to be in the loop to even know that they was those type of women. I guess what they call 304s today. We didn't call them 304s back then. We called it what they was. Because back then we didn't have all this censorship like we got today. We could just talk freely and everybody was grown, you know. We wasn't like little kids like, oh, I can't say this because, you know, the kids around. Now adults are like kids. You can't say certain stuff. My feelings hurt. All this dumb stuff. But anyway, so back then you had 304s, but they wasn't boasting about I'm a 304. If you wasn't in the know, then you would never know. Like if you wasn't one of the guys that she was dealing with or whatever like that, then you would never know that they was like that. You had to hear it by ear. Somebody might have said, hey, yo, man, this girl like this girl like that, or whatever. That would be the only way you would know about it. There's no way you can know because she said it. That was never going to happen. Even the 304s have respect for themselves. It's very, very different than today. Now they telling you they proudly promoting it as if it's a form of empowerment, not realizing that not your self-worth, everybody has a high self-worth, but your worth as in the marketplace or who you're dating and stuff like that, you diminish yourself down to nothing by having multiple men or all these men that you're sleeping with, and you're telling everybody that you're doing it. That's the problem. Everybody know it. And these women are proud to say it. That's the difference between a woman of today and a woman back then. It wasn't going to be known. She was always going to carry herself with dignity and respect, even if she was a 304. You still were going to be like, and you might not be one of the ones that could get with her. She still wouldn't just be everybody still. You know what I'm saying? She still had a standard, even if she was that. Another thing about the back then and now, I notice women today do a lot. They drink a lot more today. Like they drink heavier than sailors. And back then, it wasn't all women just wasn't moving like that, drinking so heavily and using all this profanity and talking rough and tough like they're doing now. Because see, something them women had back then was called grandmothers and great grandmothers. See, grandma and great grandma back then wasn't trying to compete with a 20-year-old like today's grandma is doing. You don't know who the grandmother is anymore because they look like, well, you know they're old, but they try to look like they're young, but you know they ain't fooling nobody but themselves. You can easily see that they are older, that they're old, but they're trying to compete with a 20-year-old. There's never gonna be a way she can do that today. But women back then, they didn't try to compete. They was already married. They already had a husband. They was already had kids. They already had lived their life happily, and they were happy women with nice homes. Husband had took care of them their whole life. I mean, just like any relationship, you're gonna have your problems. You're gonna have your ups and downs, but for the most part, grandma was set, right? No matter what. Now, the argument that somebody gonna make you as well. Grandpa was out here doing X, Y, and Z. Well, if grandma thought that was a problem, grandma would have dealt with it herself. And she probably did deal with it in her way. It ain't none of our business of what two grown people decide to do with their lives. That's another problem. People want to look at another situation and try to make a judgment call on it from where they standing at right now. What they did is what they did. Now, if you don't want to do that, which you don't have to, but there's no reason to go out and say, well, if men do it, I'm going to do it. There was a difference between women today and back then. Also, women didn't want to do what men were doing because we have different natures. We have different issues. We have different problems that come with doing that type of thing. Women are very emotional. We all know this by now. And we all know that to be able to sleep with a woman, you got to have some type of emotional connection. She had to be some type of emotionally attached to you. Men don't have to be that way. We don't really care unless we really, really like you and really, really want to be with you, then maybe. But other than that, it's nothing. We already set our mind that this ain't nothing right here, but another, whatever I guess you can say another notch in the belt or whatever. We don't really care. And we walk away with no feelings attached, no strings attached. Once we leave there, we forget all about you. We don't even know your name. We don't want to know it. Nothing. Women ain't like that typically. They typically get emotionally attached and they want to go further, but the guy don't want to go further. Then you got all these fights and arguments. But anyway, women of the 80s and 90s carried themselves with respect. They dressed accordingly. Plus, the music back then was not anywhere near like the music is today. It's not coaching women or coercing women to act the way they act. Because see, if you want to know what's going on with culture, you listen to the music. Music shapes culture and culture shapes music. It goes hand in hand. So in our day and time, women are really wearing no clothes. And they say that's empowering to be naked. Think about the mindset of that. And as men, we can't understand that because a woman's nature is very different from ours. We know the nature of women. I mean, there's not a religious scripture anywhere that doesn't remind us of a woman's nature. That's just her nature. She's going to do things that's opposite of what she's supposed to do. Some of them who have understand this have changed, but most of them, they go in that direction. And back then, at least around the areas I'm from, that was heavy. Like religion was a big deal. And you didn't want to shame yourself or look bad because you had guidelines, you had things that you had to adhere to. Were there still women doing things that they shouldn't have been doing? Of course. But there was not on this level like they are today. There were certain things, and when you come to black women, there were certain things that black women just would not do. And black men, there were just certain things that we wouldn't do, like these orgies and all this wild stuff that people doing now, threesomes and open relationships. We wasn't doing that in big numbers like today. Now you got women today that say, "Oh, I'm gonna go out and get my husband or my boyfriend another woman and bring her home. Dumb stuff like that. You do that, and in them type of situations, it always come with drama, somebody getting hurt, and then ultimately somebody may lose their life because the guy went back door and went behind the girl back, and he's seeing her on the side. It's a bunch of ridiculousness that we wasn't into back then. But to us, that was a white people thing. That wasn't a black people thing. We wasn't moving like that back then. But times have changed, right? Now we into more stuff than they are into. We doing the same stuff they do. Black women were not popping pills and drinking and going hard like they go today. It just wasn't a thing like it is now. Just overall very, very different. You could at least speak to black women back then. They would smile, speak back. Even if they wasn't interested in you, it wasn't no, why are you talking to me? I'm embarrassing you and all this stupid stuff that they doing today, feeling like they superior to you. That wasn't the case back then. They had a little more respect. They would like, hey, they'd be nice and charming, and they would be okay with just letting you down easily. But they don't do that anymore. Women today are just very, very rugged and rough around the edges. No matter how good they look, they all are very rough and rugged around the edges. For the majority, there are always going to be some that's not, but the majority of them are. It's just so many different things that I've noticed in the difference in, now you got women saying they want to be like men. They openly sleeping around, got 20, 30 bodies by the time they like 22. Just crazy stuff like that. That was unheard of in the 80s and 90s. And then plus back then you had fathers in the home. It was getting bad, but you still had fathers that was around and cared, or some male somewhere that cared. Now they don't have that anymore. Now it's just a house full of women for the most part, and it ain't good for nobody. But that's the way it goes, right? What are other differences? It's just that women didn't talk the way they talk today. They wasn't. I mean, you was beginning to see the baby daddy era pick up, but it has gotten to astronomical levels today than what it was, back then. They just carry themselves differently. I mean, I could go into so many different areas that is, Oh, another thing, they wasn't into the OF industry. I know there was no OF back then, but I'm just saying they wasn't really into that kind of stuff. That was more like men was into that. But now everybody wants to be a 304, and they think there's so much money in it, but most of them ain't making about $150 a month. They just in it for to say they in it. This their lifestyle. That's what they want to say, but they ain't really making no money. Women were just more pleasing to be around, even if you wasn't interested in them or they wasn't interested in you. It's just more pleasing, more nice, and you can get in the company of women and it'd be okay. But now they don't want to speak to you. They don't need men. All this and that come from the songs that came out in the 90s have trickled down to the next generation, and these young girls have grown up hearing that stuff, and now they are saying they don't need a man. It's all by design, in my opinion. But to say you don't need a man is not what they were saying back then. It was starting, but it hadn't got to where it's at today. And women today just genuinely hate men. They genuinely hate men. They didn't hate men back then like they hate men today. Women today hate men. And now that men are starting to say something about it, they say, now they flipped it around and say men hate women. Men will never say that they don't need women. You'll never hear a man anywhere on earth say he don't need women. He might stop talking to them, but if he can get one, he want it. He'll never openly say, you know what? We don't need no woman. I can do all this on my own. You never hear a man say that. But women say it all the time because they say it because deep down in their hearts, they know that they need a man. They inherently know this. They built that way, but they go against their nature. And since they're going against their nature, women today are more unhappy than women have ever been before. You can go look this up. Women are reporting the highest level of unhappiness than any other women before them. And supposedly those women before them were supposedly oppressed. These are supposed to be the freest women ever, yet they're the most unhappy. Why is that? I'm not going to answer that question for you. You think about what I'm saying. The most freest women ever, but also the most unhappy. Women today go to college more than any other women before them, but yet they still picking the same jobs they had from the 1950s. The women are doing the exact same work that they did in 1950s when they had no opportunities, supposedly. To the women today have all the opportunities, yet they go into the same fields. Why is that? It's not because of men. It's not because of a patriarchy. It's because that's what they choose. Women today choose to go into the same fields because that's what they're naturally inclined to do. Men go into harder work fields because that's what they're naturally inclined to do. It's not because of no pay gaps or all this and that. There's some new stuff that's been debunked over 1,000 times. There's no such thing as a pay gap. It's just not there. But, feminists are going to keep this idea going and think it's going to change something. It's not going to change anything. But that's just the way it is. I mean, there's things that's going to continue to go on. It's going to continue to get worse. And it's just a sad sight to see that these women are going to be, in my opinion, they're going to continue to get more upset these days. Women used to be happy when they had the covering of a man they was taken care of. They wasn't bucking the system. They wasn't trying to be, like leaders of the men, which that's never going to work. I don't care what you do, you're never going to be able to lead a man. You're always going to have a hard relationship. The order of things is man over woman. Man under God, women under man, and children under woman. That's where it was designed. Whether you believe in religion or whether you whatever you believe in, it don't change that. That is the natural order. Whether it's inside of your religion or whether you secular, if you don't follow that, you ain't gonna have a good relationship. It's just not gonna happen. And women back then, we used to bring the boyfriends home to the father, so the father could vet him and get to know him to see if he was a good fit for his daughter. But that's not the case anymore. For one reason, because the father probably not even in the home. But the second reason is because they're not bringing him home to meet the father until after they done got deep long into a relationship, and then they want the father to meet him, and they turn out to be a bum. Well, that would have been eliminated had you brought him home and let the father get to know him first. Because women choose badly. Women choose the wrong guys badly because it's easy to make a woman feel good. It's easy. It ain't if you good with women, you know what to say. You know how to say it. You can be lying. They think you tell the truth. Oh, he made me feel like this. I got butterflies. The whole time he running game. But see, men, we know how other men are, and we can evaluate that man to know whether he's serious or not. We can know this. Women don't seem to have that same understanding. They can't tell the difference between a guy who just want to sleep with him versus a guy who want a long-term relationship. It all looks the same in their eyes. But it's very different when you get around other men because you typically don't want to be around a father. You don't want to be around a family when you ain't serious. Because like, man, I'm not going to be here that long. I'm not trying to get in touch, get close to them. Or certain questions they may ask or certain things they may do, you try to deviate from it, go around it because you know what you're really trying to do. And they're going to sense it in you if they be around you enough, vetting you. But women don't seem to know that. They think that this is the guy, he the best one, he better than the last guy. He gonna do the same thing he did because that's the type of guy she keep attracting. Women have a type. They like a certain type. And they keep wondering why they falling into that same trap. Well, you will continue to fall in that same trap until you change something about you. And same thing for men. But right now we talk about the difference between women in the 80s and 90s and today. The overall difference is women today want to be bosses. They want to compete with men. They think they're men. They're becoming men. And they want to sleep around. They think that that's what the thing is. They want to be strong, have strength, and all of that. But really, men don't care nothing about that from a woman. A man's already strong. A man already has those things. As a woman, you're not impressing him by acting that way. It's not impressive. It's actually a turnoff because, that's another dude. And most men don't want to be around another dude, so they choose not to date a woman who's acting that way. That's another difference between women of today and women of the past. But I hope I kind of explain this, with just off of the knowledge that I already know. I hope this makes sense. It's just that back then it was very different. Very different. Women back then also did not wear a whole bunch of makeup. Like women today, they put on a whole they put on a whole face before they go anywhere. And then say I'm a 10. You a 10 because you say you're a 10 because you got on makeup. I mean, come on, man. I mean, are we gonna keep playing these games? Women back then, they wore a little bit of something, just to highlight features and things like that. But they wasn't putting on. Some women were, as I said, some women were. For the most part, no, they wasn't putting on this big 3-hour makeup session just to go out. It just wasn't happening. Plus, it was frowned upon to do it. Like women do put on that much makeup was frowned upon. Most of everything that women do today, they got it from the trans community. They got it from the we call the people drag queens and the gay community. They the ones who got women saying all that slang women using. It come from them. Women, and them men. Everything women try to do, men do it better. Even at being a woman, because they biting off of them. They taking their style, and women starting to use their style. But anyway, that's my take on all of this stuff. But just ask yourself, do you really believe that women today are doing better than the women of the past? My answer is no. And I don't think it's ever going to go backwards. I think women are on the decline. They thought they were doing a great thing for themselves, but I believe they really shot themselves in the foot on this one. At least this generation. Some generation just gonna have to go on and pass away or just get out the way so we can teach the next generation the right thing to do. And we can't let them teach these next generations coming up that they got to continue the same trend, because it's only going to be detrimental to the majority if they're following this path. So hopefully they figure it out before it's too late. Y'all take care.